Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm now joined by Dean Locke of F1. Dean, before we get into the questions we have for you, can you quick give an introduction as to who you are and what you do for F1?
Okay, I'm Director of Broadcast Media and Digital. So any content or any product delivery, making those products, I run the overarching team that does all of that. So if you see Formula One, then it would have gone through those departments.
Perfect. So essentially a dream job for most people.
Yeah,
we're in Miami for the Grand Prix. We're actually in the paddock right now. You're getting ready to broadcast this race. What goes into broadcasting a live F1 race?
We could be here a while. It's a really complicated sport to cover.
Yeah.
So if you think about stadium sport, two teams, one ball, generally going one way. We have simultaneous action going around a really large field, all doing their own stories as well. They all have their own races to cover. So I guess it's like golf, but a lot quicker.
Yeah, fastest sport in the world.
Yeah, loads of data, really complex stories to tell. So we've been doing it a while. We break it down into various areas. So here in Miami, we have our event technical center on site, which is really an acquisition. So it's getting all those data points, pictures, audio off the cars. And then we send all that to our media and technology center. So one of the biggest regular remote operations in the world. And then that's where all the curation happens. So whether that is social, digital content, but fundamentally all really coming from our world feed product and covering the race. What's really exciting is, we have 24 races plus testing now. So there's a lot of events that we're covering. And every race, we will look back and go, we could have done that better. What about bringing this in? What about being able to tell that story better? So it's always evolving.
Yeah, very exciting, very fast-paced, obviously. I can't imagine how you're able to process all of that in the moment and give us such an amazing feed and all the stories that go along with those races.
We try not to miss anything, but there's a lot going on. And, using some of the AWS technology as well, is actually to be able to understand what stories we should be telling.
Yeah, let's get into that AWS partnership. So we've obviously been partnered with Formula One for a number of years. What's your experience been working with AWS?
The early stages, I think we had to understand what we were good at and also what AWS were really good at and how we could work together, like all relationships really. And I think that took a little while to understand that we shouldn't ask AWS to do something actually that we're quite good internally and vice versa. But we certainly went with AWS with problems, which is a really good thing to do with your partner. Okay, look, we would love to do this. We would really love to do that. This is something we've never been able to do before. How can you help us? And then using that expertise on both sides. So, sometimes it was us coming up with the concept. Sometimes it was the other way around. And just how can we do that? How can we not only sort of engage the fan, help the fan understand a really complex sport, but also other areas, so how can we distribute better? How can we get the signals really, really effectively to all the fans? How can we use that technical underbelly to make all our products a great deal better?
So Ruth and I were just talking about some of the bigger, more recent big ticket items that AWS and F1 have worked on together, being Track Pulse, F1 Insights, such as time lost, I know we recently announced. Let's start with the former. What exactly is Track Pulse?
Okay, so Track Pulse, it's very difficult to find a hybrid person to work in Formula One.
Yeah.
Because you have to be a great storyteller, a great content maker, but also have the sort of knowledge that Ruth has of Formula One strategy and the dark arts of Formula One. And it's a really complex sport that we're also trying to simplify as best we possibly can. So finding a producer that can do all of that is fairly unicorn stuff. So actually what we thought is, can we make a tool that can make these producers just perform better and therefore give the fan richer insights and a better snapshot of Formula One? So can we have that producer who knows about storytelling and making things look great, but giving them those tips and a tool that says, hey, this is happening, we should really be focusing on that. Yeah. So how can we make these producers really better? That's where it started.
Okay.
And it is an incredible tool. We then once we got into it and we're still developing it now, really. But once we got into it a little bit further, we realized it's not just producers at Formula One who are making the world feed and other contents and edits. could we hand it over to our broadcast partners as well? Could they help with their commentary teams and their own studio shows? Can we enrich their shows by having this as well? So then we sort of partially changed the development cycle to incorporate them. And strangely, I don't think that's the end of it. We recognise the power of it in that, could it be a fan-facing product?
Yeah.
I've looked at it on a laptop and I was thinking I would watch that as a second screen companion. It's pretty dynamic the way it works, and we've looked at other elements. So actually, it's starting to really grow. Like, all really good sort of success stories, really. In that we don't know the end of it yet. It could all the way go through to a consumer-facing product. So exciting.
It's super exciting. I've been able to see some of the behind the scenes stuff on it, see how it works. Like you said, it is very interesting. I would totally watch it with the race. You mentioned we just opened it up to other broadcasters in April. Let's talk about that a little bit. What has it meant for our broadcasters? How have they been receiving it?
It's really good to engage with broadcast partners and say, hey, look, have a go with this. What do you think? Because it's impossible. We have so many 60 odd in 160 territories, and they're all very subtly different. So give it to a smaller broadcaster, bigger broadcaster, going, how would you use this?
Yeah.
Would it be your commentators? Would it be your producers? And interestingly, there were some elements back saying, well, we would use it as a review tool, whereas rather than a live tool, which we were focusing on. So we would go back and say, well, hold on, how did he make those jumps on lap 14? And they could go, so actually we put a timeline into it that you can sort of drag through and look at the stuff. There were some elements around team radio. Could we incorporate that? So the feedback was how they were going to use it, which was, I've been doing this a long time, and it's very difficult to predict how people will use tools. So actually the best thing you do is just give it to them, let them have a play and get the feedback from them.
I'm sure the AWS engineers back at the studio we're going to be talking to in a second, just all related hardcore to that. It's hard to tell how people are going to use things, and it's cool to see how we're able to adapt as those use cases come up.
And what I think the success story was that in normal circumstances, we probably wouldn't attempt it, but because we did that, let's try this. But most of the success stories I've been involved in, we can't see the end of it. So that continual development, like I said, with broadcast partners, I think if it was a fan-facing product, you'd make it slightly different as well. Being able to tailor that on that sort of ground level is really, really important and exciting.
Really been fun to see how it's been evolving. And let's talk about the F1 insights specifically. Well, we'll get to the specifics in a second. Let me ask you this open-ended. What are the F1 insights, just to give fans an overview, and what have been some of your favorites personally that you've been able to see come out of this partnership?
There's quite a few of them now, so I'm glad you didn't ask me to name them all. When we started a relationship, we started it with, hey, look, here's some issues, here's some problems we would love to explore, with the creativity and the technical powerhouse, of AWS. And then we went for a cycle where we refined that a little to go, well, actually, which ones can you help rather than actually, they don't make sense or they're not the core business, really. So F1 Insights are a bunch of graphics to explain a really complicated sport slightly simply. There's lots going on in a Formula One race that maybe the fans just aren't connecting. The mid-order battles, there's some fantastic mid-order battles, and someone like Ruth could really explain that well because she's been part of that. But a top team may only change their strategy once, whereas a mid-order team may change it 4, 5 times.
Trying to find some
because they're right in the middle of the field, there's traffic everywhere. So it's a lot more dynamic, and actually I couldn't work out how we could potentially tell that story. So, okay, well, let's get some really complex graphics. I once heard Nico Rosberg trying to explain the undercut. He's a F1 world champion, he couldn't really explain it. He's incredibly clever. He was going to do an engineering degree at one point. So, and he couldn't really explain it. So I was like, all right, how can we? So we set some really high bar challenges. Can we explain an undercut fret? Can we make it dynamic? So taking all the rich amount of data that Formula One has, which is huge.
So much,
huge. How can we take all that data and actually transform that into a graphic that a casual fan, an engaged fan can watch and use? So, and how can we demystify some elements of the sport? Because, we've seen this huge fan base that has changed. Younger fans,
it's been evolving, it's been growing.
So how can we? So we don't want people tuning in and going, but Formula One's really complicated. It is, but how can we sort of make that slightly simpler? So the F1 Insights is, a huge bunch of graphics that we don't use them all in one race. You might get a wet race which knock a whole load out, but actually open up to other races. You get street circuits that are really good for some of those. So it's a toolbox of graphics that we can explain of what's going on in a race and not rely only on commentators in those regions to explain it. You asked, for some favourites. I think one of the very first ones, the Battle Forecast, I still really like, and it was one of the early ones. And it's pretty simple. It's, hey, don't go anywhere, because we do get lulls in races sometimes. Don't go anywhere because this is about to happen. Yeah. So, it's fairly textbook storytelling in content. Absolutely. But how can we bring that in there? So don't go away, because in 4 laps time, everything's going to go off because he's catching them. So that's still my favourite. And we tweaked it with overtaking difficulty. I think we removed elements of it. But it's still a good graphic, and I still call for it.
As a fan, I appreciate that for that exact reason. You're trying to time out. Can I go get a snack real quick? It's I don't want to miss this. It's about to come up. I love that one.
Yeah, I really do like that one. We just launched a new one at Austin, I believe, last year, which is time loss.
Yep.
Which, and actually Ruth, I remember Ruth coming to see me, running across the paddock to see me and go, you don't know how powerful that graphic is.
Yeah.
And that's from a team strategist who was on a pit wall, not that long ago. And she said there was something in that time loss graphic that even their own team didn't spot straight away.
Really?
Yeah, which is really interesting. So, whether it's just a little kick out of a wheel, or we said a brush of a wall, we had Lando Norris in Singapore was a really good one. But it's, what we said about Max Verstappen's qualifying laps, what we had, it's hundredths of a second between 1, 2 and 3 sometimes. Exactly. How can you really differentiate or what those 3 drivers did differently?
Exactly. We're talking about minuscule things that make all the difference in the world.
It's very little space. So actually, we can sort of say, look, just that very slight overstick cost 0.3, 0.2 or something like that. Just demystifies the sport a little bit more. So
yeah, I've really, again, as a fan, the F1 Insights have been amazing, because even just getting my parents into the sport, like you said, there seems to be this high bar of it's so complicated, but they're able to explain the story of the race in such a easy to understand way.
Yeah, I think when people get into the sport that haven't been in it or not been a fan for a while, they come back into the sport and they realise there's so much more into it. It's not just 2 hours necessarily on a Sunday. There's stories all through the week, but also the practice sessions, telling stories around that, qualifying. I still really enjoy qualifying. Qualifying's a great show. And there's some great stories at the moment because there's not much in it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. We've actually set up, I'm hoping I can run into Ruth again. We just finished talking to her. Now I'm kind of curious to get her perspective on time loss.
It'd be a great deal more technical than me.
I definitely want to ask about this story of her running across the paddocks when that was debuted. But thank you so much, Dean, for taking the time to talk with us today. We're going to send it back to the desk to dive into some of the tech that Dean just told us about. Well, first and foremost, I need to apologize to our audience for leaving them on such a burning cliffhanger. Will I run into Ruth again? I guess you'll just have to stay tuned for another couple minutes to find out. But before we dive into that segment, I just want to give a quick shout out to our comment section is popping off, guys. Like when we're looking over here, we are talking about it. Yeah, we got some people from Philippines talking about Ferrari. Lots of people talking about your background here, Keely. Let's go through some more. We got some South Africa fans. India fans. We've got people that are fans of saw Sergio Perez right at the bottom there. We've got people talking about Ghana. We've got worldwide audience. We've got people from all over different fandoms here. Guys, let us know your questions. Let us know who you're cheering for, who's going to win this weekend, what kind of merch you want, I guess, from F1 too. And with this level of fandom, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out the sweepstakes that these two wonderful people underneath me on screen came up with. You might have noticed a QR code in that last segment that popped up saying you can design your own racetrack. Now, I don't want to give spoilers for approximately 35 more minutes into this program, but we'll be diving into that technology a little bit later. If you want to check it out now, I encourage you to. You can go design your own racetrack, get involved in a little sweepstakes there.
We'll give you some more details later, but I definitely encourage you guys, if you see the QR code pop up a couple more times on screen here, check it out. Pull your phone out, click on it. We'll make sure we keep giving you guys chances to do it. We got some pretty cool prizes lined up in that sweepstakes, and then you get to design your own track. So go ahead and give it a link down there. Yeah. So, all right, let's get back to the main segment here, though, guys. Jeff,
so I want to bring up something. A key word that has been mentioned right before that segment and during the segment is overtakes, and how exciting more overtakes make things more exciting. And we've kind of hit on the fact that AWS helped with the design of the current car design, but all F1 fans are kind of nervous, maybe, or excited, nervous about the 2026 design, what that's going to bring to the race. And we had a question from a viewer, Paramount. I don't know, Nick, if you can bring that up, wondering, maybe this is less of a AWS technical question, but saying how 30% more overtakes is exciting. Mike or Keely, can you add any insight on what does 2026 look like for overtakes? Do you think there's going to be more?
Yeah, I mean, look, this season in particular is a really interesting one. It's what we're calling the rise of the rookies. So there's 5 rookies in season, and I think Dean mentioned it in his talk earlier. There's obviously the top battle, fight for first and second place, but with the introduction of these new rookies, there's a really interesting mid-table battle. So I think as we kind of develop into kind of the 2026 season, we'll see these rookies kind of come into their own, and we're super excited to see the way that they develop on track and how that kind of falls into 2026 and beyond.
Keely, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you about 2026, but I think we did have dinner with Ruth last night. And she was talking about too, a good reminder that this is the last year of the car design from 2022 to 2026, which means all of the teams have taken all of those learnings, all of the data that they've had, they're watching each other and they're learning from each other, and they built some really strong cars this year. So what you're seeing is really strong speed. You're seeing them learn from each other. It's really competitive. And so you're really seeing what happens the last year of the car. And so next year it's all going to be brand new, and they're all going to be in the same spot where they don't really know what to do quite yet. So yeah, I think next year is going to be exciting because we don't know, but this year you're going to see some really top speeds and great competition.
And what's really interesting is that some of the teams have already started to work on their 2026 car and put funding towards that, and kind of invest in it. So, it's really exciting to see what's possible.
Yeah, and speaking of rookies, it looks like the audience has spoken. We got a question here asking when I'm going to be able to get behind the wheel with the GoPro. So, I feel like if everybody's going to be learning the new car, might as well. I appreciate whoever that commenter was. We're going to try to make that happen.
Well, if you're able to speak to Dean, then you're able to speak to a car, get into a car, because that man is incredibly difficult to get hold of. So I think anything's possible.
Let's get back to Dean, though.
Yeah, let's get back to Dean. And kind of talking about rookie drivers, there's a lot of rookie kind of F1 fans. And like you guys were talking about, sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on, understand what DRS is, things of that nature. But things like Track Pulse help. So Mike and Keely, can we talk about how Track Pulse came about? And I'd love to know how it works.
Yeah, so Track Pulse, Dean came to us with a problem or a challenge, which was, in the production team, there's multiple camera feeds, multiple kind of different sources of data. And his primary goal and objective is to kind of improve the fan experience and kind of keep them engaged during that broadcast of the race. So in 2022, during the Belgium Grand Prix, our AWS team shadowed Dean and his team in the production facility in London, and learned that there was a huge opportunity to start to visualize data that's coming off the car to help Dean and his team with that kind of production element. So as Dean quite rightly said, there's a lot of cameras on following various different kind of stories that kind of unfold throughout the race. What Track Pulse does is it visualizes that data in a kind of a graphical format and provides prediction using machine learning to help Dean point his camera to a potential upcoming story. So, it allows Dean to kind of create kind of a more engaging storyline for the fans to kind of watch along and be engaged. And, like we talked about earlier, it's not just the top two the top two drivers that kind of everyone's focusing on. There's a lot of mid-table and even further down the table battles that are super interesting and super engaging.
Yeah, and kind of building on that, like Dean said, F1 Insight's been around for a while. They've obviously become a massive part of the sport and getting people to understand at a faster pace. It sounds like Time Lost is one of the more recent ones we did, and it's been received really well. How did that come about? How does it work?
Yeah, so Time Lost is a really interesting one. Time Lost is an AWS F1 Insight powered by AWS graphic that we launched in Austin, as Dean's quite rightly said, and it provides that kind of timestamp of if there was a kind of a lockup or like there was a downshift, for example, what the impact to the qualifying or the kind of a race performance looks like, and using that kind of telemetry data that comes off the car. Using kind of the kind of process that we've developed and the machine learning models that we've worked on with Formula One, we're able to kind of graphically show the impact of those kind of, I guess, errors to show you in real time, because it's quite difficult to kind of really visually see if somebody's like a microsecond behind where they need to be in order to qualify. And what's super interesting is that, let's say you're 2 seconds late for an appointment. You don't really kind of bat an eyelid. If you're 2 seconds late in qualifying, that's the difference between first and last. Yeah. So we're talking about kind of hundreds or tenths of or hundreds of a second here, which, as you know, in Formula One, every percent
makes a whole difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, Ruth, it was mentioned, Dean said Ruth got really excited about this metric. So let's circle back to that wonderful cliffhanger and see if I coincidentally ran into Ruth again in Miami. I think you guys might also see a fun little cameo by somebody else on this screen during this segment. So let's roll it, Debbie.